Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 7. The same verses that we read yesterday. Texts 32, 33 to 35. Prithvi Vayurakasham Apognischandrama Ravihi Kapoto Jagarah Sindhu Patango Madhukrit Gajaha Madhuha Harino Minaha Pingala Kuraror Bhakaha Kumari Sharakrit Sarpa Unanabi Supeshakrit Ete me Guravo Rajan Chaturvinshati Rashita Shiksha Vrittibhiretesham Anvashiksham Ihatmanaha. Please chant. One each, gents and one lady.
Divivayorakasham Apognischandaram
Apognischandramarehi
Tojagra Sindhu Madhukurgajaha Madhuharino Menaha Mingala Kuraror Bhakaha Kumari Sharakrit Sarpa Purnaha Biha Superkshikrite Iti me Guravo Rajan Chaturvimshati Ashritaha Shiksha Vrittibhiretesham Anaviksham Ihatmanaha.
Ladies. Translation by Srila Prabhupada, by followers of Srila Prabhupada. O King, please repeat after me. O King, I have taken shelter of 24 Gurus. Who are the following? The earth, air, sky, water, fire, moon, sun, pigeon, and python. The sea, moth, honeybee, elephant, and honey thief. The deer, the fish, the prostitute Pingala, the kurara bird, and the child, and the young girl, arrow maker, serpent, spider, and wasp. My dear King, by studying their activities, I have learned the science of the self. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manavishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sarvanaragunatanditam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijanasaritam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshitarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So this is the third lecture on this topic. The conversation between King Yadu and the Avadhut Brahmana, as it appears in the Uddhava Gita of the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Uddhava Gita was of course spoken by Krishna to his dear devotee and friend Uddhava. The Avadhut Brahman has mentioned that he has 24 gurus from whom he learned the science of self-realization. And so far we have discussed 9. Prithvi means the earth, that's one guru. Vayu means the air. Akash means the sky or space. Apaha means water. Agni means fire. Chandrama means the moon. Ravihi means the sun. Kapoto is the pigeon. Ajagaraha refers to the python. And now we'll talk about Sindhu. Sindhu means the ocean. Now, the thing about the ocean is that it is so wide. It is so deep. The vast expanse of the ocean can bewilder the mind. For those of us who have been in the middle of the ocean on a ship, to see only water, and just water everywhere, we know how vastly expanded the ocean is. And it's also very, very deep. And when there is no storm, then the sea water can be very calm and tranquil. In the same way, the Avadhuta Brahman understood a great sage or a pure devotee of the Lord to be like the ocean, because he is very deep, very grave, and externally he may be very cheerful. He is very cheerful and pleasant, but internally he is very thoughtful, very grave, very deep. His thinking is very vast, like the unlimited shores of the ocean, and the depth of his consciousness is very deep, also like the ocean. Another thing about the ocean is all the rivers, they flow into the ocean. In the rainy season, the rivers overflow and they pour in much more water into the ocean. In the dry season, the rivers have less water, so they pour less water into the ocean. But nevertheless, the ocean remains always the same, full in itself. It doesn't get overflooded in the rainy season or become dry in the summer season. Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter, he compares the consciousness of the mind of a self-realized soul to the ocean also. Apurimanam achalapratishtam samudramabha pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sa shanti mapnoti na kamakami. He says, just as the ocean remains full, apurimanam achalapratishtam, it is deep and full in itself. Samudram apah pravishanti yadvat. Even though into the ocean so much water flows and it remains the same, calm, tranquil. Tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve. Sa shanti mapnoti na kamakami. In the same way, such a self-realized soul remains steady even in the midst of desires that may come or go. So such a person who has controlled his mind can attain peace. Not one who's always being subjected to so many material desires. So this is how the self-realized soul can be compared to an ocean. This is the realization of the Avadhuta Brahmana. So he compares, or he says, the ocean is another one of his gurus. Patangaha. The Patangaha is a moth. The moth, you know the characteristic of a moth. It is very attracted by light and by form, especially fire. And you see many of these moths who will rush headlong into the fire because they're attracted by the glitter of the fire. And when they enter into the fire, naturally, they get burned and they die. So similarly, the attraction of form in this world is very powerful. It leads to unnecessary sexual indulgence. So people who get attracted simply by the physical form, they are like the moth who rushes headlong into the abyss of ignorance. And because of such ignorance caused by excessive attachment to the physical body and indulgence in the pleasures of the flesh, one loses one's spiritual intelligence. One cannot discriminate properly now. One's consciousness becomes polluted. So therefore, the eyes and the form, the eyes like to see form. The eye is a sense and the form is a sense object. So, the Avadhuta Brahmana says that this wasp is my guru because I have learned how we should not become attracted to form. So guru not in the sense that the wasp is setting the ideal example, but it's the opposite. He learns how one should not be like the wasp. So in that sense, he's learning from the wasp. Or not the moth, actually, not the wasp. So when the moth flies into the fire, it perishes. Similarly, those who indulge in sense gratification excessively, they also die a spiritual death. Because a person who is constantly engaged in sense gratification cannot pursue spiritual life. The next guru of the Avadhuta Brahmana is Madhukrit, or the bee, the honey bee. Now there are two kinds of bees. Does anyone know which kinds of bees? You know bees, right? Queen bee. Yeah, of course. Queen bee, the worker bees,
the
yes.
bumblebee and the honeybee.
Wonderful, wonderful. You have read the 11th canto, right?
I did, yeah.
Yes, correct. It's a wonderful answer. Exactly, bumblebee and the honeybee. The bumblebee in Sanskrit is called Brahmar. And the honeybee is called a Makshika in Sanskrit. So I'll explain why they are so called. Now, the first category of bee, the bumblebee, is also called Brahmar because the Sanskrit word Brahmar means to wander. So this bumblebee, it wanders in pleasant forests and gardens. It goes from flower to flower and takes the nectar from each flower. In this way, it collects all the nectar and brings it back to the hive. And then in the hive and wherever the bees live, then there are the honeybees, which actually manufacture the honey there from the nectar. So here it indicates Madhukrit means the bees. We should be like the bees that are the bumblebees who go to the different flowers and take a little bit. So a renunciant should accept alms a little bit from everywhere. You see, in the olden days, the sages would wander place to place, and at every house they would beg alms, bhiksham dehi. They would stand at the door and say, please give me alms. And then the householder would come up and give some chapati or some food, some fruit or whatever it is. And with that little bit he would be satisfied. Go to the next house. Bhiksham dehi, please give me alms. And then they would get some alms and go on. So a little bit from different places. In that way, the mendicant would not be attached to any one particular house. He remained detached. And neither was it too much of a load on the house that was given charity, because many mendicants would come. So this was a culture in the Vedic times, that every householder was expected to give alms to mendicants who came at their doorstep. Similarly, a renunciant in the modern times also should not eat too much repeatedly just at one place, at one family. Because when the renunciant then starts accepting the hospitality of one family too much, then it is against his principles, because there is a possibility of getting attached to family life. And similarly, when too much attention is paid to any particular family, it causes resentment among others, and it disturbs the social order. So the genuine renunciant should be very careful to imitate, or not imitate, but follow the example of the bumblebee. Take a little from everywhere. That is called Madhukari. Madhukari actually. Madhukari is followed by many Babajis or sages in Vrindavan even today. They go to the Brajabasi homes, take a little one roti from somewhere, a little sabji from somewhere, like that, and that's how they live. And whatever comes by providence, they accept that as prasad, and they live like that. The other example, but sometimes what happens is that if the honeybee, or if that brahmara, that bumblebee, it resides too long on that flower, because it likes the nectar and it stays too long, and at sunset, then at sunset the lotus closes and the bumblebee gets trapped inside and dies. Similarly, if a renunciant becomes too attached to others in the household life, then he also stands a risk of covering his spiritual knowledge and his renunciation with darkness. So renunciants must learn from the example of the bees and be very careful. So he should be like the bumblebee, taking a little from everywhere. Another angle from which we can compare the bumblebee is that just as the bumblebee takes a little nectar from different flowers, similarly, the true renunciant in knowledge must accept the essence of knowledge from different scriptures, from different places. He understands the essence. Therefore, he is called a Saragrahi. Sara means the essence. Grahi means one who accepts. So he accepts the essence of knowledge from different places. Unlike the intellectual asses, but that's how the Acharya explains it. Sorry to use a few strong words. The intellectual asses who burden their consciousness with so much of unnecessary knowledge, loads and loads of knowledge which have no value from the spiritual point of view. So instead of trying to burden our mind with loads of unnecessary knowledge, we should take the essence, devotional service. There are so many scriptures, so many Vedas and this and that, and it can get quite bewildering. So we should be like this bumblebee, a little from here, understand the essence, that's Krishna, and devotional service to Krishna. So these are the things that the Avadut Brahmana learned from the bumblebee. So he considers the bumblebee as one of his gurus. The next guru is Gajaha, that's the elephant. Now the elephant is attracted by the she-elephant naturally. So one way that the hunters in the forest trap the elephant is that they dig a hole and cover it with grass and straw and twigs and so on. So it's not visible. And then they place a she-elephant on the other side of the hole. It's quite a big hole. The idea is it's very difficult to capture an elephant easily because he's such a big and powerful animal. So when they place the she-elephant on the other side of the big ditch, and the he-elephant sees her and he wants to come in contact with her, he comes rushing and then he falls into the ditch. And then he can be easily trapped because he can't move out. I think you are not familiar with elephants. You haven't seen how they behave and their traits. Here in England, people are more familiar with pet dogs. Everyone seems to have a pet dog. So elephants are very special creatures. In one farm in India that I'm associated with, there are some forests in the nearby, and there are some elephants in the nearby forest. And they often come in through the forest. And when they get into the farm, then they can really destroy your crops like anything. They can just crush your crops if they're angry for some reason. So one easy way to keep elephants away, dig a ditch. Even if it's not a very big ditch. An elephant, and the local villagers describe that when the elephant comes near a ditch, it stands there and pauses very thoughtfully. It stands in deep thought. You can actually see the elephants thinking deeply. This is a big ditch. Because the elephant is aware of its own massive size. So a little slip and the huge body falls down. It's very hard for the elephant. So the elephant is very cautious when it comes to ditches and holes. So he stands there, observes, and then turns away and goes. He realizes, oh, this is not good for me. But there are other animals like deer, others will just jump over the ditch. So just the ditch doesn't solve the problem. So in any case, the hunter captures the elephant like that, because the elephant falls into the ditch. So similarly, when one is too attracted to the pleasures of the opposite sex, the pleasures of the flesh, then that is also like a blind, deep ditch into which one falls. Sexual attraction in this world is so powerful, and that is Maya's chief instrument to keep the living entities in the bondage of material existence. When one is possessed by the desire to enjoy this kind of pleasure, it is like a madness that comes over the person, and no spiritual knowledge can penetrate into the mind of such a person. So one has to learn from the example of the elephant how getting trapped in this kind of pursuit can lead to one's spiritual destruction. So you can see now, in the course of this discussion, he's going to talk about the five senses and their forms, the sense objects. And how, when the sense goes after the sense object, there is so much danger. In other words, sense gratification is dangerous business because it can lead to our spiritual death. So there are five senses. Which are the five senses? The eyes, the nose, the ears, the tongue, and skin. Okay, so now, what does the eye do? What does it see? Form. So the sense object for the eye is the form. So we have already discussed in the case of the moth, that the moth is attracted to form and flies into the fire and is burned to death. And we compared that to a person who's attracted to a physical form, and then that leads to his spiritual death. In this case, it's the example of the elephant, the sense of touch. The elephant wants to enjoy the sense of touch, and that leads to his destruction. There'll be others too, the other three senses. We'll come to that. There are also his gurus there, teaching him about how the other three senses, hankering after their respective sense objects, can also lead to suffering. So this is the example of the elephant. The next is Madhuha. Madhuha means one who is a honey thief. In our farm one time in India, we had these beehives, and the honey was coming up slowly, but then there are bears who stay in the nearby jungle. And you know that the bear's favorite food is honey. And the bear has a natural covering of hair on his body. So even though the bees come to sting, he has a natural protection. But the bees strike him on the exposed parts of the face and so on. So the bears, they come in to the hive, even if the bees are there, and they just plunder the honey from the hive. And the bees will go and sting like anything the bear. And if it's a baby bear who is not yet trained properly, not experienced enough, you will see it's getting stung all over the place. The bees really go after it, the bear. Because you see, it is their life, it's collection. They've worked hard. Just like somebody comes to your home and wants to steal all your money. You're going to really sting that thief. So the bees in the hive, they really go after that bear. The older bears, they can somehow manage to fend it off, and they are thick-skinned and they have a lot of hair on the body. But the baby bears, they also protect themselves, but it's hard for them. There are also other hunters who know the trick of stealing honey from the hive. They have techniques. They sometimes light a fire under the hive. The hive may be up on the tree branch, so they light a fire. And the smoke can be so intense that the bees can't tolerate it. So the bees fly away. And then the hunter goes up and very nicely takes away all the honey. And in some different ways of collecting honey, because we have to cover so many other gurus. Otherwise we'll just be talking about honey. There's enough on honey to just take up a lecture actually. Yeah, the real nectar is Hare Krishna. Real honey. So, the honey thief comes to the hive and steals all the honey. And who has worked hard to make the honey? It's the bees. They struggle hard all day long to get a little honey. They accumulate a substantial amount. The honey thief comes and steals all the honey and goes away. Similarly, the Avadut Brahman said, people struggle hard in this world to accumulate money, because money is honey, right? It's sweeter than nectar. Money is such a nice thing for the people of this world. They just want money and more money. In the Bhagavatam, Prahlad Maharaj says, yes, money is honey. So people want this false honey. The real honey is the nectar of the lotus feet of the Lord. The real honey they don't know. They go for the false honey. So they work hard to collect money, and eventually somebody else takes it away. Either a thief may come and take it, even though he may take so much effort to hide the money and all that. In the olden days, people would hide their treasures, ill-gotten or otherwise. In the ground they would bury it, sometimes under the mattress, sometimes in the cupboard. But nowadays there are more sophisticated ways of hiding your money. You have Swiss bank accounts and so many other places. You want to hide the money from the tax authorities and you do so many things. Sometimes you get caught and you're humiliated and so many things happen. So we try to protect our hard-earned money, whether by moral means or by immoral means that it may have been earned is a different question. We try to protect it in so many ways, but eventually it's taken away. Inflation eats into our wealth. The tax authorities take away our money. Our family members and friends want this and they want that, so that the money goes away. And finally, when we die, we have to leave behind all our money here and somebody else enjoys it. We leave the inheritance for somebody. So we can hardly enjoy anything from that money. So the intelligent person must think that I'm working so hard for so much money and eventually somebody else will get it. So one should not work so hard for one's maintenance of the body. One should work simply, live a simple life, and spend time and energy for Krishna consciousness. That is how our life should be. And that is what the Avadut Brahman has learnt from the Madhuha, from the honey thief. His next guru is a Harinaha, or the deer. The deer, you know how the hunter captures the deer in the forest? Because deer are very nimble, they have nimble feet. So they really jump and run very quickly. And they have sharp ears, so they can understand sound very quickly. The hunter plays a flute or some other musical instrument. Deer are enchanted by music. Deer love music. So if he plays a nice melody on a flute or some such instrument, the deers are like hypnotized. They come there and then the hunter can easily capture them. Actually, there was just the other day, Sachinandan Maharaj was at the manor and he told the story of Akbar and Birbal. Not Birbal, but Tansen. Tansen was one of his gems in his court. He was a wonderful musician, extremely talented, a musical genius. And his singing was so captivating that it was very, very enchanting. One of the best musicians of his time. So one time Akbar and Tansen and other followers, the soldiers, had gone out into the forest and they were sitting down and enjoying the forest scenery. And Tansen was singing at Akbar's request. And it so happened that a deer came in from the forest hearing the singing of Tansen. It was so melodious and so sweet. And the deer just drifted along as if hypnotized and came all the way up to Tansen. Now normally deer are creatures who are very afraid. The slightest noise, the slightest interference, any other living creature comes in the front, he gets scared and runs away. But now, even though there were so many human beings sitting there, many of them soldiers with weapons, the deer was so captivated, just came up and right up to Tansen. Tansen had a flower garland and he garlanded the deer. And then the deer went away. And then Birbal said, I'll accept your musical genius if you get the garland back now. So Tansen said, all right. So he began singing another tune, another melody, and sure enough, the deer came back all the way to Tansen. He quietly removed the garland and gave it to the king. And Tansen and Akbar said, yes, Tansen, there's no one to beat you. You are unique. This is the power of music and the impact it has on the deer. So the hunter, he plays these musical instruments and the deer comes in and the deer is then captured easily by the hunter. So here is the third sense of hearing. So we all want to hear pleasant sounds, nice sounds. So we now hear so much variety of music. And everyone wants to hear music. They all the time in the cars as they're traveling, they're playing music. They go to pubs and bars, they want to hear music. In their homes, they have music of different kinds. But this kind of music has nothing to do with one's spiritual advancement. It has nothing to do with Lord Krishna. So we are also getting pulled in by the sense of hearing to such sounds, which eventually cause our spiritual destruction. So this is the third example, right? The first one was the eye and form. That was a moth. The second example, the elephant, he-elephant and the she-elephant, the sense of touch. Skin and the sense of touch. And this is the third example. The ears and the sense of hearing, and the example is the deer and the music of the hunter. So this is how, when the senses are unrestrictedly try to be engaged in their sense objects, they lead to destruction, spiritual destruction, sometimes even material destruction. The next guru of the Avadut Brahman is Meenaha. Meena means fish. You know how a fish is caught? In England you have a lot of older people who do fishing, right? You go for fishing. Sometimes when I carry this danda at the airport, they ask, what is it? Is it a fishing rod? Yes, like Jesus said, we have come to fish people out from the water, right? We've come to the fishing rod, yes, to hook you out, pull you out from the ocean of material existence. So the fisherman, he attaches a worm to the end of a hook and then releases the hook into the water. And the fish comes, oh, gulab jamun, for fish, it's a Sunday feast. So the fish comes and is very attracted, tempted, its sense of taste. The tongue and the sense of taste. So it's attracted to that worm and puts its mouth around the worm, but it gets stuck, and the fisherman pulls it out, and that's his dinner. So the fish falls prey and meets its physical destruction because of the sense of taste. The tongue wants to taste delicious foods. So similarly, we can meet our spiritual death if we do not restrict the tendency of our tongue to always want to taste delicious dishes. So the urge to eat delicious food is a very powerful urge. In fact, it's one of the most powerful urges, to speak and to eat. The tongue is very voracious. We sing every morning before prasad. What do we sing? Jive Prele Vishya Sagar Taramati Jivati Lobhomaya Sudurmati. The senses are very difficult to control, but amongst them the tongue is the most difficult to control. If the tongue is controlled, then the other senses can be automatically controlled. And one of the functions of the tongue is to taste delicious foods. So, from the fish, the Avadut Brahman has learned, control your eating. Don't run after delicious foodstuffs. Only eat that which is offered to Krishna. Only eat Krishna prasadam. So as devotees of the Lord, we are not too austere when it comes to eating, and neither should we actually go to the other extreme and eat too luxuriously. Both extremes are not good for our Krishna consciousness. So therefore the fish is also one of the gurus of the Avadutta Brahman. The next guru is Pingala. Pingala is the name of a lady. She lived in a city called Videha in ancient India. And she was a prostitute by profession. And why is she the guru of the Avadutta Brahman? It describes at one time, this Pingala was standing outside her house at the doorstep, leaning against the door, waiting for a customer to come. And time passed by and no customer would come. She wanted money, and she was waiting, and as the people were going by, she was inspecting the man. Oh, this one may come. It looks like he has a lot of money. I hope he comes here. That one looks like a wealthy person. I hope he comes here, then I will make a lot of money. But as it happened by the arrangement of Providence, nobody came. She waited and waited and waited. It was past midnight, still no one. So she became very dejected. She became extremely sorrowful. And she went and sat down on her bed. And at that time, that sorrow, somehow by the mercy of the Lord, created an intense detachment within her. from this whole business of this bodily concept. And she started thinking, what is this that I'm doing? How am I spending my life? I'm spending my life just for a few moments of physical pleasure and just to earn a little money. What is this body anyway? This body is just like a house in which I, the soul, am living. The bones, the skeleton are like the beams and the cross beams and the pillars of this house. And this body is like a bag that contains so many unpleasant substances. What kind of pleasure can come out of this body? And who are these men with whom I want to enjoy pleasure? What is their nature? They are also temporary living beings. Their body is also just like my body, the same bag of filthy substances. Instead of loving the Supreme Lord Krishna and experiencing great happiness, I am spending my life trying to just enjoy this body and enjoy the pleasures of this world. And she began to think like this and came to a conclusion. From this moment, I will give up the pleasures of the world and focus only on the Supreme Lord. And when that conviction suddenly dawned on her, she experienced a tremendous peace and serenity. She became very calm and she went back to her bed and had a very good sleep because she was now completely peaceful. It's a long explanation, I'm just abbreviating it and telling it in brief. And the Avadhut Brahmana concludes by saying, material desire is the cause of the greatest distress. And the relief from material desire is the greatest happiness. So Pingala expressed that when she gave up her material desires, then she became peaceful and happy. So this is what the Avadhut Brahmana learned from Pingala, who later on became like a sage, because she had given up her material desires. Then Kuraraha, the next guru. Kurara is a bird. It's actually a hawk. So one time it so happened that the Avadhut Brahmana noticed this one hawk who was of medium size had a piece of meat and he was about to eat it. At that time, there was another group of hawks that came along. They were big in size and they were hungry. And they saw that this hawk has a piece of food, piece of meat. So they all attacked this one hawk to get that meat. This is the way of life. Might is right, isn't it? So when they attacked, and they were all bigger in size and huge, and there were many of them, so this one hawk who had possession of that piece of meat, he thought quick. He said, if I keep holding this, it will be the cause of my death. These hawks are going to kill me. If I leave it, I lose my food for now, but at least I live and I'll be peaceful. So the hawk that was holding the meat, he left it. And when he left the piece of meat, all the hawks didn't harm that other hawk. Because they got what they wanted, they got the meat, and this hawk became peaceful. So the Avadhut Brahmana learned that in this life, if you detach yourself from the things and the people around you, you will experience happiness. The more you become attached, that attachment will be the cause of death. You want to earn more money, you want to do this, you want to do that, but there are others who want to come and they become enemies and they try to pull you down. So many complications in this world. It's a harsh world we live in. So following the example of the Kurara bird, the hawk, the Avadhut Brahma decided to be detached from all these things. And he experienced peace. The next guru is the Albhakaha, or the child. What is the nature of a child? The child is free from anxieties. Have you ever seen a child being worried about what others are going to say about me? What is going to be my prestige in the society? Or where will the next meal come from? How will I be able to pay my bills for the next month? Or how can I get the next model, the highest, best model of the car? And how can I save up enough? He's not concerned. The child is happy-go-lucky, carefree, happy in all circumstances. The parents take all the anxiety. So similarly, the Avadhuta Brahman learned from the child to be happy, not be worried about these things. Krishna will take care. Just as a child is not worried because he depends on the parents. The parents are going to look after everything. So the Avadhuta Brahman said, in the same way, I will depend on Krishna. He will take care of everything. I don't have to worry about the body and the maintenance and the prestige and what other people will say about me. Give it up. Like a child, experience happiness in life. So we have to be childlike. Child is also innocent by nature and pure by nature. So children can do many things because that are embarrassing to adults, because a child is very pure and innocent. He just speaks so many things. You know why children were created in this world? To embarrass the parents. They have this knack of saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. They'll suddenly come up with something. Those who are grihasthas have good experience. So children are like that. They are peaceful, they are happy-go-lucky, carefree. So the Avadhuta Brahman learned from the child how to be carefree and happy in life and not be bogged down by so many self-created burdens. The next Kumari, the next guru is Kumari, the young girl. When she came of marriageable age, many suitors and their families would come to her house to see whether this girl was nice and whether the marriage match would be all right. One time it so happened that this girl's family members went somewhere for some work. There was no one in the house, she was alone. Then some suitors came to the house, unannounced. So she naturally went inside to prepare some food for them, to offer them in hospitality. So as she was beating the rice and she was doing some kitchen operations inside, she had many bracelets on her wrists, conch shell bracelets. And as she was moving her hands, they were clanging against each other and making sound. So she was fearful, that these suitors may think that our family is very poor and therefore we have to do all the work ourselves. So they should not hear the sound of the clanging. So she removed all the bracelets and left 2 on each hand. But still there was a sound coming. So then she removed the other one too, and there was only 1 and 1. Then there was no noise. And she happily did what she had to do and went out and fed the guests. So the Avadhuta Brahmana learnt that when many people come together, there is clanging sounds. Yes? Everyone talks, useless talk, prajalpa. And because of that, then there is argument. And because of the argument, there is enmity. And enmity leads to so many other things. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, in his purports to the Nectar of Instruction, he says that the urge of speech, if it is not controlled, can lead to death. Because it causes so much enmity. When the tongue is uncontrolled, the urge to speak can make you criticize others. Then that person becomes your enemy and he criticizes you. And then there is argument, there is quarreling. It may sometimes lead to violent situations also. So better to be alone. So this is especially for Gyanis. Because when Gyanis come together, they all get into their speculations and arguments and differ with each other. But for devotees, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, being alone means being in the company of devotees and speaking about Krishna. It's as good as being alone. However, even in the association of devotees, we should be careful that we don't come together to talk prajalpa. Do you know what such and such happened here? This happened there with that one. Do you know what happened to him? No prajalpa. Just talk about Krishna. So this is what he learned from the young girl who was also his guru. Sharakrit, the arrow maker. Avadhuta Brahmana noticed that one time the king of the land was walking on the street. And naturally, when the king walks, there's a big retinue of musicians and others who come with him. It's a big deal. So many people around him glorifying the king, hail the king, and so on and so forth. And musical instruments playing. And naturally, you can't help but notice it if you are somewhere near the street. But there was this arrow maker, and he was focusing his mind on making the arrow straight and the edge sharp. And he was so absorbed in that activity, that blacksmithy work that he was doing, that he didn't even notice that the king and his retinue had passed by. So the Avadut Brahman learned that this is how we must learn to be focused on Krishna. Not get distracted by the clamor of this world. There are so many things in the world that will distract us, so many noises and sights and smells and so on. But we focus only on Krishna, one pointed attention. Sarpa, the next guru, the snake. The snake is very intelligent in the sense that he doesn't bother about making his own house. The snake doesn't bother about mortgages and about renting houses. He just takes another house that has been abandoned by somebody. Or usually goes to the hole of a rat, because the rat takes all the trouble to dig out the earth and make its home. And as you know, snakes eat rats. So when a rat sees a snake, he abandons his house and runs away. Better save his life than his house. So then the snake gets a house to live in. So he lives there peacefully, doesn't have to worry about griha, about building a house or taking a mortgage and so on. So similarly, the Avadut Brahman learned why to complicate one's life with doing so many things about making a house, getting this and that. Live simply as possible. Take the example of the snake. Be unnoticed. Live a low-profile life. The snake always avoids attention. It's there under the ground, in the bushes. Don't unnecessarily attract everybody's attention. So therefore, these are the things that the Avadut Brahmana learned from the snake. The next is Urnanabhi. Urnanabhi is a spider. The spider, you have noticed what it does. It secretes a substance from its mouth, and then from that it creates a web. And in this web, many insects like flies, they get caught. And then when the time comes to withdraw the web, then he withdraws the web within himself. In the same way, the Avadut Brahman understood this is how the Lord functions in relation to this material world. Like a spider weaves its web, the Supreme Lord creates these universes from within himself. And he spreads a web of Maya. And the conditioned souls are like the flies and others who get caught in that. And when the creation is over, then he takes the creation back within himself and rewinds it within himself. This is how the Lord creates, sustains, and destroys the entire material creation. This, the Avadut Brahman understood by seeing how the spider works. So the spider was also his guru. And finally, Supeshakrit is a wasp. The wasp, sometimes what it does is it lives in a small hole. And one time he saw that the wasp attracted a smaller insect into the hole, and the whole end was trapped there, the smaller insect. Now the smaller insect was in great fear, thinking of the wasp. The wasp who was its enemy, the wasp wanted to eat that other smaller insect. So the smaller insect's consciousness was fixed on that wasp in great fear. And because of that, it created its own consciousness, in its own consciousness, the consciousness of the wasp, always thinking about the wasp. And in the next life, it became a wasp. So the Avadut Brahmana learned that depending on what you focus your mind on, and you focus your consciousness on, in the same way, you will attain that state of life in the next life. You will get an appropriate body in the next life. In the Bhagavad Gita also Lord Krishna says exactly that, isn't it? And especially if you think of Krishna, then you go back to Krishna. You also get a body like Krishna's, in the sense that you get a spiritual body. So what we meditate on, what we think about in this world will determine our next body. So the Avadhuta Brahman said, I have to be very careful that I don't think of the things of this world, I think of Krishna. So in my next life, I can get a spiritual body and go back to Krishna. So these were his 24 gurus. And for good measure he said, and yes, O king, there's another one. That's my body. My body is also my guru. I learned detachment from the body. Because I see that this body is always a source of suffering. Always giving me so much trouble. Therefore, let me give it up. Let me give up the attachment to the body. So my body is also my guru because I learned the principle of detachment by understanding the nature of the body. And then having spoken like this, the Avadhuta Brahman walked away and went on his way as directed by the Super Soul in the heart. And King Yadu very gratefully offered him respects and also went on his way. So it is explained by the Acharyas that this Avadhuta Brahman was none other than Dattatreya. He was an incarnation of the Lord. He is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Those of you who read the first canto, you know. So he was also a sage like this, walking around. So in this way, the Avadhuta Brahman learned from observing the things around him, and he became self-realized with the help of these 24 gurus. Okay, I'm sorry, I've gone beyond the time by 7.5 minutes. So we'll stop here. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantharaj ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande.
His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Swami ki jai.